Nothing beats a Jet2 holiday. And right now, you can save £50 per person. That's £200 off for a family of 4.
I am wearing a slutty crop top in honor of the lead. The Mana series is weird. It started out as a Final Fantasy spin-off, mostly for marketing purposes. Each entry tells a story about a group of heroes on a journey to stop a certain evil from tainting the mana tree that houses the goddess, and a magical sword hangs in the balance. I played the Trials of Mana remake back in 2020, maybe 2021, and I had a good time with it. I thought it was cute and fun, so when I saw that Visions of Mana was practically 60% off, I thought, why not give it a try? My initial impression of the game was that it was nice looking, great colors, great gowns, beautiful gowns, and thematically unchallenging, which I was desperately in the mood for after wasting all of this time trudging through the 100 line and being so bored. Visions feels like the video game equivalent of a beach book. It's pleasant. You take it with you on vacation as something to do and relax with. And it did exactly that for me. Granted, I was really sick when I played it. The game gave me some sweet respite from a throat infection. In Visions of Mana, alms are chosen every 4 years to pilgrim to the mana tree, where they'll give their lives to preserve the flow of mana. Not to be confused with the Fire Emblem lead, alms are an act of charity, usually involving giving money or food to those in poverty. In this world, everyone generally follows the same religious teachings and believe that being selected as an alm is the highest honor. You're committing the most selfless act anyone could. Traveling is initially represented as rare and inaccessible. One of the main perks of the pilgrimage then is that the alms get to go on the trip of a lifetime before sacrificing themselves. There are 8 elements: fire, water, wind, earth, dark, light, and then the last 2, not super intuitive, moon and wood, each with a respective alm. They're traditionally selected from specific areas in the world, so the game easily justifies having a swath of locations for you to visit, including multiple biomes and a good mix of wide open areas for you to explore between the towns and dungeons as you pick up each of the alms along your journey. I appreciate that it feels big without needing to be a huge open world game with a lot of wasted space. There's a good sense of scope. The setting feels appropriate. It's not so big that you're wasting a ton of time doing nothing, and it's not so small that exploration is unimportant. It's Goldilocks setting design. It's the right size. We play as Val, a 17-year-old from Tiania, the Fire Village, and you know it's the Fire Village. They live down the hill from a volcano. They love to forge. The food is so spicy. Val has been chosen as the Soul Guard, the knight who's meant to protect the alms and ensure that they make it to the mana tree. During a grand festival where they light a bonfire, the fairy descends to name the alm of fire. Hina is the one chosen. She's a friend of Val's. Maybe they're like childhood sweethearts. Whether or not they have some sort of previous romantic entanglement is ill-defined. They're the 2 leads. The basic premise is that they're going to go on this journey. The gameplay feels easy to start, but probably complicated to master. Visions is an action RPG. All of the battles are in real time. The combat is not that interesting. You have a weak attack that does a short combo with multiple button presses, and a strong attack that doesn't seem to chain into the combo at all. I think for every available moveset, the combo finisher does some knockback, and there's nothing to really close the gap, so I felt a lot of combat was spent just like swatting enemies away, and you have to keep rushing up to them again just to keep the momentum going. I would have loved if the combat just felt a little snappier. Maybe the hitbox could be better, weapons could be longer, knockback could be shorter. There's definitely a solution. Taking advantage of the elemental weaknesses is fun, and I enjoyed the ability animations, especially as you get stronger casts, but the combat left a lot to be desired. Visions has a fairly robust class change system. Basically, as we pick up alms along the way, we also collect elemental vessels containing a large amount of the respective element's power. Each party member can equip one vessel, resulting in a class change and access to new abilities, weapon types, and outfits. The vessels are also feel useful in combat. Most of them deal a lot of damage, but similar to weapon types, some are just better than others. I posted this on Blue Sky. Follow me on Blue Sky, subscribe, like, check out my Patreon if you have the means. I have a Discord. That's the link plug for the video. I'll do it again at the end. I posted this on Blue Sky, but Visions to me feels like a pretty close equivalent to what a Genshin Impact home console release would feel like. If Visions had gliding and climbing, they would be like this. I think the bright, highly saturated art style combined with multiple move sets, quick switching between characters in tandem with one of the earliest areas being this like large grassy field that is wind focused. That aspect reminds me of Mondstadt. The towns aren't really similar at all, but you have the ability to ride these wind currents. They bear some similarity in that way. There are various currencies for different types of shops and to work on your character's skill trees, overworld puzzles to solve, time trial combat areas. I know many of these things are standard fare and not necessarily unique to Genshin, but if anybody is looking for a non-gambling equivalent that doesn't continuously ask for your time and money, I put forward Visions as a good alternative. The game is also beautiful. I found it a little buggy at times. Sometimes characters' clothing would clip and then refresh. It's very apparent when someone is the focus of a cutscene and their hair keeps resetting or their skirt isn't sitting right and it's not quite clicking within the game engine. I had those issues a couple times, a couple other glitches. The Mana Tree Sanctuary really stands out as one of the most gorgeous areas I've ever seen in a game. It really is so nice to look at. Okay, now we're gonna get into spoiler territory where I talk about the plot because the game has some good ideas, but unfortunately it doesn't execute them in very meaningful or interesting ways. We know Val and Hina, but the prologue takes place a couple years earlier in the Earth village Guju. Here we play as Auron, who is running away with his wife Liza. She's been chosen as the Alm of Earth, but she doesn't want to give up her life, so they try to escape together. The flow of mana says, no, you can't do that. The townsfolk are all transformed into golems, and Liza is petrified in stone as punishment for absconding. These are the stakes of not participating in the pilgrimage. Some sort of divine retribution will devastate your town and everybody in it. Auron managing to avoid being turned into a golem is left unexplained, but it's necessary that someone survives for the plot to happen. Now we can fast forward back to Val and Hina. Again, I picked up this game because I thought it would be a very no thoughts head empty experience. I struggle to recall any plot detail from Trials. I just remembered that it looked nice and I had a nice time playing it. And that's what I wanted from Visions. It doesn't need to stick with me in 10 years, you know what I mean? But much to my surprise, this is a compelling setup. These characters inhabit a sort of stratified world where the information they get is quite limited. So they have to pretty uncritically follow these religious traditions because that's the way it's always been. The positive attitudes around guiding people to their deaths is disconcerting, and surely the cast are going to run into people with contrary beliefs who challenge this system. Just because something is entrenched in your society doesn't automatically mean it's an inevitability. When all is said and done, Visions doesn't actually have anything to say. Kudos to them for starting with a compelling value proposition. Valentina make for Longrin, the Veil of Wind. They go for a long walk on the beach. Along the way, they meet Auron, who presents himself as a traveler doing some sort of research with a vested interest in the Alm's journey. He subtly tries to dissuade them from completing their duty, but Val and Hina aren't exactly thinkers, so they're like, what do you mean? Everyone considers this to be a huge honor. You're not making any sense. Auron drops it for now, but this is not the last time he'll try to plant seeds of doubt. After this meeting, Val wonders if Auron knows Liza. Liza is originally from Tiania, and she was chosen as Soul Guard. I don't think there's a lore justification for this. The pilgrimage seems to always start in the Fire Village, and they take a similar path of picking up the Wind and Moon alms first. Liza was likely Soul Guard 8 years ago and settled in Guju after completing her journey, and Guju fell 4 years ago after she was chosen as the Alm of Earth. In Tiania, they did know that Guju fell, but they were never sure of Liza's fate. Val wonders if Auron knew Liza because he's Gaian, but Hina very quickly shuts that down, and she's like, wow, Val, check your privilege. Not all Gaians are from Guju. Socially conscious queen, this will not be the first time that Hina is woke. Something that will come up really sporadically is that Val has the unique ability to turn things into crystals. So once we have our first monster encounter here, some of them turn into shards that can be used as a crafting resource. Bookmark that. Once we get closer to the Veil, we encounter the sacred beast Ramco and 2 young dragon folk. Ramco randomly presents us with the wind vessel, the Sylphid boomerang that can launch enemies into the air, and the kids ask us to return it since no one will know that they took it and they won't get in trouble if we bring it back. We arrive in Longren to learn that the Alm hasn't been named yet. They have a unique method of dyeing fabrics with wind, and the fairy will only come if someone slays really hard at it, but no one's efforts seem to be sufficient. The village leader really wants us to get Karina to help. She's the best dyer in Longren, but she's a bit of an outcast because she went to the Wind Sanctum when she wasn't supposed to and lost one of her wings in an accident. One very confusing creative choice is that Karina speaks with a southern accent and no one else in the village does. That's the actual issue. It's not the fact that she speaks with a southern accent at all. It's that her and then one random NPC way later are the only 2 characters in this game to do so. I know that this decision is informed by her speaking with Kansai dialect in the Japanese dub, and that dialect is typically localized as an American Southern accent. I think it's meant to emphasize that she's othered. I would get it more if there was another dragon folk village that her family was originally from where they all spoke like her, but she doesn't even share the accent with her parents. So did she make it up? Like, I don't understand. It really sticks out that Karina speaks this way, because how did it happen? Anyways, she wants us to talk to her crush on her behalf, and then she might help depending on that conversation. Karina wants to be the Alm. Her crush, Shiryu, thinks that she would be a good Alm, but many in the village disagree. They think that she's a little punk and she doesn't deserve it, but they still want to exploit her skills to attract the fairy. Karina still ends up refusing, so Val tries to do the dyeing on his own. Unsurprisingly, he doesn't do a good job because he has no experience. Him doing so poorly basically annoys Karina into showing him how to do it, and she ends up doing such a good job that the fairy arrives. It looks like she's gonna pick Shiryu at first, but he sprints away immediately, and then Karina asks to be named Alm. Fairy says if Sylphid, the wind elemental, agrees, then she has the job. We scale Mount Gaia with our new wind gliding abilities, save Sylphid from a big bug monster causing trouble, a bug with a fat ass.
A bug with a big ass.
Karina is the Alm. On we move. The moon village has fallen, but the group decides to pass through on their journey anyways. Now we're in the snow. These characters are in crazy outfits for that, and it seems like it's permanently nighttime in the area leading up to Aeterne, the Moonlit Parish. It's a small castle town. Once we arrive, we're ambushed by Morley, a furry who, like, I don't know, maybe you tell me, does he have an accent or is it just like an implacable affect? He warns us against entering the parish since most settlements have barriers to protect against monsters, but Aeterne doesn't have this anymore since it fell. A few monsters run through the gate leading into the city and they seemingly disappear, but they've actually traveled back in time, since that's the moon's power. Morley shares his tragic backstory. He's actually the last survivor of Aeterne, and he wants to fix things by finding the moon vessel and entering the town during a lunar eclipse, which is conveniently only a couple weeks away. We find the vessel, the Luna Globe, which lets us stop time in combat. Very busted. Very good. Amazing vessel, beautiful vessel. Once entering Aeterne, we're sent back in time and see a vision of Morley as a child. There's a giant sand glass in the middle of the town. Morley climbs on it and it shatters, which he blames himself for, but it seems like there was a separate cause, like an earthquake, that led to the village's ruin. The specks of lunar sand send everyone it touches back in time, and the last time he saw his mom was when she dove over him to protect him from the sand. Some more time shenanigans ensue. Morley becomes his child self for a little bit. The elemental spirit Luna is restored, and the parish becomes inhabitable once more. Morley is named the Alm of the Moon. We can move on. Now we're heading for a port town since we need a ship to take us to the capital. It's tradition for the pilgrimage to pass through Illistana to receive the Queen's blessing and meet with the alms of water, dark, and light. On the way, Morley's mentor Milpa gives us mounts. Crazy alliteration. They help us more quickly get through this field area to Rada Harbor. There's a quick subplot where we meet Passar, an evil capitalist squirrel furry who accuses Karina of stealing a key from him. We say we'll return it so that he doesn't unlawfully jail her, and Orin appears to help us find it. He's conveniently everywhere that we are. What a guy. He does not forget to mention that there was a time before the alms sacrifice. You know, things weren't always this way. And if we can just get our hands on that dang, mana sword. We might be able to alter this fate. Val and Hina, no thoughts, head empty. That just like washes over them and they're like, Orin, you're so silly. We need to get on the boat and we're gonna fight this big octopus monster, because if you're doing a JRPG and you get on a boat, you're legally obligated to put an octopus encounter on that boat. I don't make the rules. Once we're getting close to the capital, there's a brief scene where the Alms all discuss how they feel about being selected. Karina and Morley both see it as a great honor, but Hina kind of pauses before saying that her parents were really happy that she was chosen, which makes me think that her parents weren't really happy when she was chosen. We make it to Illistana and encounter the next party member, Palomina, in a terrible disguise, very Princess Jasmine coded. She is the queen, but she's doing boy drag so that she can move through the city unbothered. Morley clocks her immediately and leaves the party to escort her. Morley and Palomina will continue to have some unspoken romantic tension throughout the game, but while they're exploring the city in private, Palomina shares that she's been named Alm of Water, which seems like a great way to leave the capital and by extension the kingdom. Is this a kingdom? If we have to go somewhere and she's the queen, is she the queen of everything or just the queen of Illistana? It's not that big of a place. Anyways, saying that the fictional queen has to die seems like a great way to leave the capital in a really vulnerable position. I have trust issues with fairy companions, thanks to a game that I'm not going to name because I don't want to spoil it and it recently got a re-release, but Palomina's selection really made me question whether or not this selection process was intentionally meant to be disruptive. Like maybe it's designed to keep the world in a certain state of chaos. Similar to Morley, I was anticipating Orin becoming the Alm of Earth since he's also the last survivor of where he's from, and I think that would be more interesting since he clearly disagrees with the whole process and is probably traumatized by the punishment for not complying. I think he'd be such an interesting addition to the party, and I'm predicting that the cast will make it really far along in this process before their faith is tested, by learning some sort of grim truth that puts the whole process into question. Up to now, we have plot justifications for Karina, Morley, and Palomina. They're all talented people of an extraordinary circumstance. Hina, by contrast, is a nice girl in a pretty dress. And she knows it. She mentions not really being special by comparison. We don't totally know yet if there is an ulterior motive in the selection process. It very well could be random, but it's also possible that Hina might possess a unique attribute, ability, quality that justifies why she was chosen as well, and we just haven't uncovered it yet. The successor to the throne is Palomina's little brother Ian, but he's a preteen, so he's gonna need some adult supervision. Palomina wants Niccolo to guide him. Niccolo is a local merchant and recurring character in the Mana games, kind of like Anna in Fire Emblem. Niccolo is trusted by the royal family. He's also Morley's adoptive father. The game doesn't sit with that for very long, and it felt like a weird detail every time it did come up. Passar, evil squirrel 1% man, also wants to control Ian because recently Palomina reworked the economic system such that the rich can't accrue overwhelming wealth off the backs of the poor. God, I wish that was true. The game doesn't interrogate how she did that. Like maybe she could offer us like a playbook, but that's okay. Basically, the upper echelons aren't happy with her and they want permission to be evil capitalists again. The water stops running in the city and we have to go to a nearby ruin to get it back on. We get the water vessel, the Undine Flask, which lets us traverse certain areas in water bubbles, and in combat you can spray water at enemies that traps them in a bubble, and if you pop the bubble quickly enough it does a lot of damage. I was a big fan of the flask. That makes it sound like I drink, but I don't anymore. It gives me migraines. We get to the bottom of the ruins, we fight a crab with a big ass, freeing Undine, the water elemental, and restoring the flow of water to the capital. Ian will take over as king once he's old enough, and things are in place for Palomina to leave a little more comfortably. While we're still in the city, Hina and Val get some romantic development. They have a very Aladdin-esque scene where Val comes to Hina's balcony at night. The Alms are staying at the palace, but Val has to stay at the inn because he's just a measly soul guard. There's another scene where Val buys Hina a star necklace. They've obviously been harboring feelings for each other, but they've started to say the quiet part out loud. And naturally, this does complicate things, seeing as he's walking her to her death. Now that they've traveled through about half of the known world, Hina is starting to believe that some things actually do beat a Jet 2 holiday, and she's not so sure about giving up her life anymore. Oren is such a stalker, he interrupts their balcony romance scene and says that a future exists that doesn't demand sacrifice. He shares the parts of his backstory that the player already knows. Liza was his wife, she became Alm of Earth, so on and so forth. Hina, again, queen of inclusivity, is like, we knew Liza got married, but not who her partner was. Did y'all catch the P on partner? Oren is invested in them because his situation was so similar. But there's a way to stop it. We just have to get on the boat and go to an offshore shrine without telling anybody that this is what we're doing, so that there's no protection in case something goes wrong. Val and Hina have no survival instinct, so they go with him despite the fact that he's weird. He's being weird. Hina wants to go home and live a full life. I relate to that. I understand why she wants to do that, but unfortunately the game is about to get so bad. Oren doesn't share anything about the ritual he's going to perform. He opens this huge grimoire. He starts casting the spell. Remember how Val has this seemingly irrelevant ability to turn things into crystals? These crystals are called core stones, and our main party are pretty much the only characters who understand what this term means, but they use it a lot to people who are like, what the fuck is that? And then they have to explain what a core stone is. That happens too many times in the game to be acceptable. You can't just say core stone. Like, at what point do you say a word that somebody else doesn't know and then you realize that you should adjust your language because it's a term that you made up for your purposes, and if other people don't know it, they're not going to understand the stakes of your situation? Just say crystal. This big bad ritual required Val and Hina because it basically hijacks Val's power and turns Hina into a core stone, effectively killing her. What makes the scene even crazier is that they play the equivalent of, like, I feel like Love is Blind is the most popular example of a show doing this, but how most of their background music is like royalty free, very on the nose, kind of describing what the situation is. I am certain that this is the only time the game uses a non-diegetic song, and the lyrics are so bluntly about Hina going to heaven. It did not top the charts, not in this house. Don't stream. Do not stream. I was already disappointed in this scene because, to me, they're getting rid of the most interesting character. She has the most to do and say. She's the only character right now with the opportunity to go through a meaningful change, and they chose to get rid of her, one, right when her personal tensions were mounting. She takes on this task, everyone else around her is encouraging of it, she makes mention of having issues, there's some friction there, and then as a character, she's finally had a breakthrough where she decides to do something that's against that grain. So not only did they kill her off right when she was getting interesting, it's also only in service of giving Val anything to do or think about. Val has nothing. He has nothing going on. He's a golden retriever boy who loves to show midriff. That's where we start and finish. This is what caps off Act 1. Now we get to sit with him for the next 2 acts of the game where he's that same person, but now he's sad that his girlfriend died and it was his fault that he failed as the soul guard. You know, he feels responsible. He feels survivor's guilt. There's one scene in the whole rest of the runtime that actually deals with this, deals with how Val feels and like sort of walks us through his thought process. But otherwise, the characters are all able to pretty easily move on. Even Oren makes the argument here that Hina was going to die anyways. They were committed to the pilgrimage. They were going to walk her to her death. While it's technically true, Hina withdrew consent the second that she told you that she wanted to live. So that's not fair of him to say. The game fails to critically explore Oren's actions either. Like, there's a really clear argument that justifies why he would do this to them. He lost his wife. By sacrificing one, he could perhaps save many, but we don't hear much from Oren for the rest of the game. He's gonna use Hina's core stone to get the mana sword. She literally got fridged. And for what? Like, to what end? Val returns to Illistana ashamed. Karina reams him for being naive, and now his village is in danger too, as they receive confirmation that the long dormant volcano is active once more, since there's no Alm to mitigate that. After some back and forth, and Niccolo being Val's surrogate dad saying everything will work out, they decide to continue the pilgrimage and retrieve Hina's core stone. We need to make our way to Eleusia Isle, which is in the very middle of the map and isn't an island. It's just on a very tall cliff. I don't know if it's exactly a plot hole, but the Alms of Dark and Light were supposed to meet us in Illistana. The game handwaves this since they haven't been named yet. Until we meet them, I was curious if they were operating in the background, but Visions of Mana lacks object permanence. If it's not in front of our face, it's not really moving. In this portion of the game, my brain fully disconnected because I was annoyed that Hina was killed off so unceremoniously. I fully missed the plot point where it was like essential for them to go get this seed in order to grow a beanstalk to climb up the cliffs. We meet the Beast Watch, who live in a small settlement at the base of the cliff. I'm not beating the furry allegations. Why is everyone in the Beast Watch so hot and not wearing any clothes? They're naked. They're a little naked. They plant the seed, but the stalk can barely grow, and it's because the soil is barren. So we have to go consult the earth elemental Gnome. To do this, we have to find a way to Guju. So the group makes for the free city Sata, hoping to catch a boat there. Here, no one possesses anything and all belongings are shared. Unless you're the party, we just take stuff. And we're randomly given the fire vessel here. Salamando's candle lets you do a big fire punch, and in the overworld you can ride it like a rocket and do these short mini games. It's just crazy that it was handed to us randomly. Why was the candle here and not in Tiania? Ideally, we'd be able to set sail from here, but no boats have been able to get in and out for a while. Whenever someone tries to set sail, an enormous wall of water is raised, obstructing their path. Palomina falls into a trance and hears a siren's song, reciting a poem that she recognizes from childhood about a pair of star-crossed royals who can never be together. Of course, we go to a nearby ruin to solve the issue. We see the statue of a Vuskov, which is like a cross between a duck and a turtle. The statue is reaching up to a human princess standing on top of a wall. I wonder how this is going to shake out. We go through the ruins, finding the rest of the lyrics, and read them to the Vuskov statue, who starts crying as it comes back to life. We have a brief boss fight here, after which we connect that the Vuskov needs to reunite with his love at the top of the water wall. We ride through the water on his back and see the spirit of a woman who physically manifests as a Vuskov. The wall falls and we've basically unlocked the Pokemon equivalent of Surf, removing the need for a boat moving forward. After reuniting these turtle ducks, we set sail for the Earthen Continent. The desert looks similar to the area around Aeterne before we healed it from the blight. It's dark, kind of sad looking. The sky isn't really visible past the sandstorms. The party heads to Guju and meets Watts, similar to Niccolo, another recurring fixture in the series. He's the only one who still lives there. He gives us the Orin Liza lore dump about how they fell in love. Orin was a ceramicist and Liza basically became an earthen convert. It took a while for the village to accept Liza, and by extension their in-universe equivalent of like an interracial relationship, an intercultural relationship. The couple had to face a lot of scrutiny before they were accepted, and they had to work really hard to build a life together, which is why they tried to flee the village when Liza was named Alm, causing the village to be met with divine punishment. Here, the group sees her statue. Val is shocked that Liza would abandon her duty, especially after being a soul guard and facilitating the journey for others. Liza stays incapacitated in one way or another for the game's entirety, so we don't explore much of her interiority when it comes to the hypocrisy here. Of course, people are entitled to change their minds, that's normal, but we never hear from her what it was like to be a soul guard and why becoming an Alm herself was where she drew the line. I think she could have offered some unique insights as someone who was devout and then decided that it wasn't for her once she had everything to lose. Right now, Visions of Mana is 2 for 2 for having these really interesting women who are not dead with a capital D, but are in a state where they cannot speak. Anyways, Watts gives us the gnome shovel, which is the earth vessel, and once again, we head to a nearby ruin to solve the problem. In battle, the shovel digs up a sphere that halves damage, I think, while we're fighting from inside of it, and the mines that we head to have a bunch of problems where we take control of golems and punch heavy objects around to trigger weighted buttons. In the depths, we fight a mole with a big ass, freeing Gnome. He's useless and doesn't seem to give a shit that Guju fell and no one lives there anymore. What do the elementals do? Like, what is their role in all of this? We have this fairy who I'm suspicious of, but that's probably not going to lead anywhere, because this game is not very complex. And then these elementals, are they guardians of the land? Obviously they affect the area. We had to free Nome, which not only cures the blight on the earthen continent, like the sandstorm goes away, the skies clear up, but then the soil is accommodating enough to grow the beanstalk. I have questions concerning the rules of the world. Does having a population affect how much power an elemental has? Seeing as they're pretty localized by region, the elementals only exist in a certain area. Don't they have an interest in what's going on in that area? I know all of the elementals are conveniently being eaten by monsters, but shouldn't they have immense power? How come Nome couldn't just conjure up a big spike and kill the mole himself? I'm not totally sold that these little magic battery beings are just helpless conduits, but that seems to be the closest thing to the truth. And like people's belief in them is mutually exclusive. Like they don't have anything to do with each other. That was confusing to me. This would have been the opportunity for us to get an Earth Alm. That doesn't happen. It's a little bit annoying that the party seems to be the only characters who like care about the world and about what's going on around them and about like examining these systems, even though the examination is quite shallow. Like the elementals are really apathetic. The townspeople are really apathetic. No one seems to give a shit about being alive. Like I don't know if this like lack of will is intentional because the game doesn't really explore it. We head back to the beanstalk, we climb it, now we're in Elusia. The party ventures through a bountiful jungle to reach the verdant burrow. Here we meet Shota Sproutling Jule. He tends to the other Sproutlings who are in plant form, and whoever flourishes the most beautifully, let's say, is going to be chosen as the Alm of Wood. Jule plays folk songs on his guitar and has a very nihilistic perception of the fact that Dryad, the wood elemental, hasn't shown up yet. He basically shrugs his shoulders and is like, well, the burrow's gonna get blighted and we're all gonna die anyways. And the group does push back on this and they're like, maybe you have the ability to affect change, right? Like this apathy is starting to be really bothersome when we go to a place that only has a population of 1, because Jule is the only speaking person in the burrow. He's the only Sproutling that we meet. The rest of them stay plants for the game's entire runtime. We fight a flower monster with a big ass, free Dryad, and we get the wood vessel. The Dryad sprig summons a healing tree. It's mildly better than the gnome shovel, but they both summon stationary things that aren't very useful in a combat system where attacks have very little reach besides spells. Jule is named Alm. We're really close to the Mana Sanctuary where the Mana Sword is kept. Obviously, Auron is headed this way. His end game is the Mana Sword, so we need to go confront him before he uses Hina's Core Stone to pull the sword. Auron is already at the sword. He makes this shitty argument about how we were going to kill Hina anyways, which I feel like is an extra shitty thing to say because she changed her mind. And we're only in this position where he's holding her soul in his hands because he lied to her. We get the world lore drop here. Basically, there were 5 separate realms that all merged at a certain point, bringing magic and monsters to the world. Kidiel is the term used for the merged world. Fadiel is how the world was before Arvet's War, which destabilized the 5 realms centuries ago, causing them to collapse into each other. Fadiel is also the name used for the world in other games. From what I can glean, the Mana games share a very loose continuity, so maybe Visions is a distant sequel of a previous entry. Back to the sword. Auron has apparently been influenced by a disembodied voice of evil this entire time. He pulls the sword, a really hot tall guy emerges. He is Delaphos, the hero of legend, and he's gonna kill everybody. A nearby tree is actually a living being, very Deku, very Mother Willow. His name is Trent, which is hilarious to me because what do you mean the ancient guardian of the forest has a fuckboy name? Oh my god, Trent. That's too much. I would have changed that in the localization. Trent engages Delaphos in combat so we can escape, since we're not strong enough to take him on at this point. Thank you, Trent. We're gonna refer to Delaphos as Dale for short for the sake of brevity. Jule says that Dale is likely gonna release the Benevodons, big bad monsters that each contain a portion of his powers. I hate to make this comparison, like Horcruxes. He wants to get back at the Mana Goddess. We don't know why. He also mentions heading to the Earth Benevodon first. For the rest of the video, Delaphos is Dale, the Benevodons are Bennies. It's easier to say, Also, a delicious breakfast. Back to Guju we go. Auron is at Liza's statue. Dale is here for some reason instead of fighting the Benny, because obviously for the sake of gameplay, we're gonna do that. And he kills them both. Val is nearby, so he accidentally turns them into core stones and crashes out about this power that he can't control. But thankfully he didn't experience really any issues like growing up with this ability or on his journey thus far, besides the Hina incident. Like, if this was a curse, if this was a power that Val was not supposed to be satisfied with, it shouldn't have been hand waved as an unimportant mechanic at the beginning. It should be coming up a lot more. I forgot that he had this ability until it came up at Hina's sacrifice, and now it's come up again. If in another universe, I'm in the writer's room and I can give feedback before the game came out, if he has this seemingly awful power, it should plague him. Maybe he was isolated from the village as a child, right? Like, does it have to do with death? Does he have to be close to a dead body? How come he can't control it? How come the village was just like cool with him the whole time? Was there never a funeral where he stood too close to the casket and then like someone turned into rocks? No thoughts, head empty, beach book. That's what Visions of Mana is. I think this is a funny time to read Auron's fandom wiki description. Auron is the starter antagonist of Visions of Mana, notable for being the least evil villain in the series. He is a young adventurer who befriends the main hero Val, only to sacrifice his girlfriend Hina in a plot to restore the world of Fadiel and his loved ones. He tries to steal the legendary Mana Sword, only to release the main villain Delphos, who kills him. A brutal eulogy. We fight the Earth Benny. It's a big sandworm. We ride a ship and fire cannons at it. This fight is pretty unique in that there's minimal direct combat. After the battle, we get the light vessel. Again, it's really strange that the earthworm had it. The Lumina lantern is mostly used for puzzles where you point light in certain directions to reflect off of mirrors and activate solid light bridges. In combat, it can connect groups of enemies, dealing residual damage. It's good for big encounters. I don't think it does anything against bosses. Next, we head to the island of Lograzzo, which is where the Alm of Dark is typically from. And because they can't be classically evil, the lore associates darkness with knowledge. So Lograzzo is filled with insufferable academics who are incompetent at anything unrelated to their research. We meet Aish and get the Vessel of Darkness, which they are using as a building support. This town is crazy. Like, what do you mean they didn't want to study that and they're using it to keep a building propped up? Make that make sense. The shade lens lets us see things that aren't true, but is mostly used as a grappling hook to get across areas. We climb Lograzzo's Archive Tower, IMO. This is the most visually impressive dungeon of the game. We walk up the sides of walls, constantly getting turned upside down every time we use the lens to grapple to a new area or teleport. The composition of the library keeps changing. It's illogical and surprising. I thought it was really cool. We find the info Aish needed to create a poison that will incapacitate Dale. He attacks us in Aish's lab right after he finishes the poison, and it works. While Dale is down, he mentions someone named Cerulia. Spoiler alert, but everything in this game is motivated by a woman dying. We immediately go back to the archive to fight the Darkness Benny, freeing the elemental shade, and Aish is named the Alm of Darkness. Although at this point our party is full and he doesn't join us in combat, Hina would passively heal the party throughout battle, and Aish fills a similar background support role. It's just unfortunate that we lost the best character for Aish, who I don't like very much, and the game doesn't even like him very much because he's not in our party the whole time. Next, we head to the light island Terratio, I forget how they say it in the game, where seemingly their only export is a playhouse. They're about to stage an opera telling the story of Delphos and Cerulia, but no one can remember their lines. Unprofessional. We use the light vessel to help some of them get their memories back, but the show's leads are still struggling, so we have to go to a nearby ruin to solve the problem. We learn pieces of Dale's backstory from the actors here as we head to the dungeon. In universe, he's a historical figure, so I thought this was a clever way of doing exposition without a grand villain monologue directly from him. We make it to the boss, and she's a cutty lady with a big ass. She tells us that Val and Dale have suffered the same pain, saying that utter faith corrodes into utter resentment. Hit tweet. The game is about men acting out after they lose their loved ones, which I guess shares some thematic symmetry with the Mana Tree infinitely reincarnating souls through the life stream, but it's not very satisfying. Hot take, I'd prefer it if Hina and Liza were still agents in the story. After freeing Lumina, the actors remember their lines and the show can happen to summon Fairy. Val is named Alm of Light because we didn't meet any new key characters and the game is tapped out. It's the first time a Soul Guard has also been named Alm. Now that we have as many magical sacrifices as we're gonna get, we return to the tree. We learn a bit more about the rebirth of souls. This is only possible because the realms have merged. Trent says there's change brewing in KDL. Oh my god, Trent, you're so smart. We meet Vidis, this gorgeous dragon princess. She's basically the Sphinx, testing whether she's gonna give us permission to go to the tree. We get to the sanctuary and it's stunning. Here we meet Coda, the spirit of the first Soul Guard. Is it perhaps intentional that the spelling of his name is the Persian word for God and he's the one actively overseeing the tree as the goddess slumbers? Who's to say? He tells us about the mortal war that collapsed the plains. The Benevodons were causing chaos, so the goddess bequeathed the mana sword unto Deilephos, and he defeated them, but Cerulia died around this time and he turned on the goddess. Deilephos and Coda fought, but the result was Coda becoming a spirit and Dale turning into stone and getting sealed, with Coda splitting Dale's power into the Bennies. Dale's will is what's cursing the land, not the Benevodons, not really the elementals either. The mana goddess is using all of her power to keep the realms from imploding, which is why the alms sacrifice is necessary. It counteracts the effects of the curse and keeps the land stable. Throughout history, Coda has been turning alms into core stones to offer to the goddess. This is basically their only recourse until she awakens. He is Val's ancestor. The remaining Bennies attack the mana tree, but there's a fierce Susan Storm force field protecting it, and they immediately leave. It's a grand but useless scene. It really doesn't do anything. Coda is like, hey, you guys have the potential to do a lot. And I think he's insinuating that we have the potential to revitalize the goddess and break the cycle. Ramco gets a boost here and becomes our flying mount. There are still 5 Benevodons we need to defeat. Eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed that the ones we fought already didn't take any of our party members back to their hometowns, so we're on the Homecoming World Tour. The Flame Benny is still dormant, so we're dealing with Val's trauma last by force. You can do the 4 in any order. I just did them based on recruitment, especially since by this point in the game, you have all the vessels and can do all of the map checklist stuff. So starting around Longren lets you knock more of these things off the list, and subsequent areas will have less to do. Part of Longren has been closed off due to strong winds breaking boulders off the mountain. Again, apathy runs strong in this world. The locals don't really seem to care. They feel like they can't do anything about it. Karina asks around for help, and everyone, including her parents, may as well have called her a stupid bitch for asking. She asks for one favor, and they really don't let her breathe. They're also confused as to why the alms are back, since that's pretty atypical. I get the confusion, but like Karina's own parents aren't like even a little excited to see her. Damn. They try pushing the boulder by themselves. Obviously they struggle because it's a big boulder. Everybody else in the town rushes to help and they apologize to Karina because they were all disproportionately rude to her. Sylphid comes. An elemental in this game is useful for once, and it lifts the boulder with its wind magic. Karina, once a village outcast because she got into an accident, has returned to defeat the Benevodon and save the town. It would be a bit more satisfying if we weren't going to do this exact same arc 3 more times immediately in succession. Since we're revisiting areas, the game has added dungeons with a bit more visual spectacle for us to explore. The party scales the mountain by riding wind flows and defeats the lightning beast with a big ass, saving Shiryu in the process, the only person from the Vale who actually wanted to solve the problem. Karina asks why he ran away after the wind dying ceremony, and it's because he wanted her to be named Alm, but he panicked when the fairy flew at him. That interpersonal thing is resolved too. That's the Vale. Next is Aetern. The parish has been revitalized. People live here again. Great. Everyone is being a little weird. Their perception is clearly off. Our pals start behaving in almost the opposite manner, but Morley and Val are unaffected. Luna comes and explains that the light, dark, and moon alms wouldn't be affected by the perception changing magic. We head to the nearby castle overlooking the town and have to navigate a series of time-based puzzles as we flip areas in the castle between past and present in order to make our way through. There are also projections of people from the past that we can interact with. Now, this is where I got my first crash. I wasn't expecting it at all. The game has had a couple of buggy moments, but a crash is always a bummer. The area is otherwise beautiful, especially the last section leading up to the boss, where we reverse time slowly so that we can jump off pieces of the ruined castle as it reforms. That was tremendous. We fight the moon frog with a big ass, briefly talk to the king of Aetern's soul so he can absolve Morley for breaking the sand glass, since it's impossible that a child just sitting on it could have devastated the whole town. Morley also has a moment with his mom. It's a watershed. I don't know know what they talked about. I don't really remember, but I'm positive it was emotional. The king tells us how to repair the sand glass, and we save the town. Onto Illistana. Things here are pretty business as usual. Everyone in the city has something to say about how much they adore Ian, so I thought maybe he was going to be an evil ruler, or that the water was causing some kind of cult-like obsession, but that's not the case. The problems actually start once we get there. Ian suddenly comes down with a fever and the water stops running again, so we have to go to the same dungeon as before, just deeper into a new basement area to defeat the water Benny. Killer Croc with a big ass. Like, that's only funny to people who watch Game Changer on Dropout. Watch Game Changer on Dropout and you'll get that joke. You'll be in the in crowd. Ian and Palomina have a touching scene where he says he doesn't want her to die and she wants to be there for him to help him rule. So I am getting the sense that the party is quietly changing their minds about the pilgrimage. He even calls her Mina, which is a nickname I don't think we've heard before. I thought it was really sweet. Last up is the Verdant Burrow, and the Sproutlings were all eaten. The Wood Benny is a big bird who flew to a floating island really far away from Eluzia. Trent isn't doing well, probably because he's wood. We reconnect with Aish, who gives us the Ent equivalent of Advil to cure Trent's hangover. We fly to the island. Apparently it's all that's left of the Mystic Realm, which is where the Bennies are originally from. We explore a little, and thankfully the Benny comes to us for the fight, which is handy. We save some time. After saving the Sproutlings, Jule comes to the conclusion that they shouldn't have to live as plants. They should get to explore the world too. So the group actually doesn't want to do this anymore, and no one is expressing their doubts directly. Suddenly the Fire Benny has awoken, so we can go back to Tiania. You can come here once you get the ability to surf, but the NPCs have very bland, generic text, as opposed to asking like where Hina is, because she's already dead by the time we can go. And it's because they're saving it for now. Val talks to his parents and they're like, wow, that's crazy. It doesn't really matter what he's doing because he's boring. He has nothing to say. Then we go to the volcano. We meet the last elemental, Salamando. We defeat the last Benny and return home a hero. Val confesses to Hina's parents that he failed to protect her. Based on Hina alluding to her parents earlier, I wasn't sure how they were going to take the news, but they're really accepting. I guess they've had a lot of time to come to terms with her death. It's not like they were anticipating that she'd survive. I was just anticipating like a bigger reaction. Hina left Val a letter for when he would eventually return home. He cries a lot. I would care if this were a more interesting story. Sorry. There's not really any examination of his complicity. Like, Oren technically has a point when he brings up that Hina was prepared to die anyways, and it feels like Val only wants to prevent the alms sacrifice because she's gone. I understand wanting to prevent a tragedy from happening again, but the characters aren't having open enough conversations on where they stand. Are the other alms still gonna KMS? I know the answer is no, but it's an interesting discussion that they're just not bringing to the table. Also, objectively, we know this because of Liza, but they can't be the first group of alms to be like, this sucks and I don't want to do this. It's not plausible to me that they'd be the first group of people to have an issue with this system. We link back up with Aish, and he's figured out Dale's location by tracking mana fluctuations. He's on the Bridge of Eldin. This is where he initially swore his love to Cerulia. It's implied that Cerulia's death was somehow the goddess's fault. I was thinking that she might have been an original alm, but she was actually killed by a human during the war. The goddess wouldn't revive her, so Dale decided that if Cerulia can't live, no one else should either. That's why the land is cursed. He wants to make it uninhabitable, and his grudge is stronger than everything else that has ever happened. Dale serves as an example of who Val could have become, and Oren was just a couple steps ahead of him. Val argues, finally he has an opinion, that mortals have been choosing to do the pilgrimage for a long time, basically to say that like Dale should leave people alone. And I don't really agree with that since the choice is coercive. If the premise is that one person's sacrifice will save many, and if that person is chosen, either they only die themselves or everyone including themselves, it's not really much of a choice. Also, you're watching this video. My audience is comprised of smart, compassionate, good-looking people. We all know that the way it's always been done is an insufficient justification for why something is happening. Val is shilling for the goddess, and I can't help but disagree with him, especially after he was so broken up about Hina dying a couple scenes ago. It pisses Dale off so badly that he breaks the legendary mana sword and absorbs its powers. Dale heads to the mana tree to finish things, and we follow. Time is distorted here. We see a vision of Liza and a bunch of other soul guards guiding the alms to the tree. When Liza was the soul guard, her sister was named the Alm of Fire. Again, I think she would have a lot of interesting stuff to say if the game didn't turn her into rock and then into crystal. She facilitated her sister dying, and then when she was named Alm, she couldn't hack it. Let her speak. Let women speak. Cerulia appears as a spirit, and I think she has one line, the way that this game hinges on fridging interesting women as a vehicle to push these men forward is driving me crazy. We fight through an extra dimensional boss gauntlet, and it's just really long. Like, they have huge health bars, and I played the game on easy. JRPG endgame dungeons are hell. The blight is getting worse, and Coda is nearly out of power to protect the tree. Dale is the final boss. I kept spraying him with the water vessel and then eventually won. Auron and Liza's spirits manifest from the core stones. They tell Val not to give up. That was weird to me. It feels as though they're laying it on a little thick that we need to honor the dead, because Ghost Auron doesn't even want to issue an apology. We're in this mess because of you. Like, yes, souls get reborn or whatever, but does that mean Val and Hina didn't have experiences and their lives were obsolete because their spirits don't die? I don't think so. The elementals gather around, they repair the mana sword. Hina appears for a brief moment, doesn't speak. I think my game glitched and Delphos's model didn't appear where it was supposed to, because for me, Val jumps into the air, stabs nothing, and then a bunch of purple fog pours out and Delaphos is defeated, I guess. The goddess finally makes her grand entrance, bringing Cerulia with her. She's like, wow, Dale, you could have reunited with your girlfriend in Magic Soul Washing Machine Heaven if you weren't a little brat baby holding a centuries-long grudge. She also says two souls entwined like theirs will find each other again, perhaps referencing that Auron and Val archetypically have gone through the same thing. Or maybe she means it in a more literal sense, that love transcends and they'll meet again in their next life. The person with the mana sword has the power to determine the future. I was expecting Hina, Auron, and Liza to all get revived for some sort of happily ever after, but Val just chooses to end the alms sacrifice and credits roll. That's it. Hina can be dead. Maybe the magic sword is not that powerful, even though they've basically said it was all powerful and that you can change destiny. Val literally changed the fabric of the universe by stopping the alms sacrifice, which, like, damn. That sucks for Hina. Your boyfriend wasn't even thinking of you. I guess if we're using Delaphos and Auron as models, doing everything you can to get your beloved to be alive again isn't an awesome choice. There's a post game. I didn't play it. I know it loosely connects to one of the previous entries, but if Hina, Auron, and Liza are dead, I'm confident we have nothing more to talk about. So that's the game. I feel like I outlined my thoughts very thoroughly. I liked it for shapes and colors. With where the game left off, I had my fill. It didn't overstay its welcome. It was enjoyable. It was relaxing. The plot decisions were a little baffling. I think the combat could have been more enjoyable. The plot was surprisingly ambitious, but unsurprisingly handled without care. That's it. That's all. Have you guys played the Mana series? If so, what's your favorite entry? By extension, what's your favorite Square Enix series? I've been meaning to play FF7 Remake for a while. It's one of my favorite games ever, and I've been dying to talk about it on the channel. Same with Kingdom Hearts and Nier Automata. Those Squeenix games have really been on the front of my mind for a bit. Feel free to like, feel free to subscribe. It's free. Leave a comment, share. The engagement all helps the channel. I recently hit 2,000 subscribers. Literally not possible without all of you at home thinking that I have something interesting to say. So thank you for that. If you're interested in further supporting the channel, we can take this off platform. I have a Patreon, I have a Ko-fi, I have a Blue Sky, I have a Discord. If you want a little bit more of me, that's where you'll find me. Oh my God, also the second channel. I forget about her sometimes, but she exists. Here, we're gonna stick to video game review content, whether it's video game reviews or like more zoomed in character or thematic discussions. Those are gonna live here. Second channel is more so for like random uploads or for things that don't perform well on the main, just so that they stay alive. Unfortunately, I have to anticipate that the algorithm is going to be hateful and not supportive. Okay, thank you very much. I will see you all in the next one. Okay, I misjudged the necessity of the jacket because it's really cold in my apartment, but under the ring light, we get really warm and toasty. I was like, oh my God, why does my script look blurry? Like, how come I can't read it? Crazy having a disability.